All right, hi everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar. I think we can go ahead and start. Before starting, let me introduce my colleague. This is Vincent Liuti and I'm Sana Awar, and we are both field application engineers with MultiLane. I'm based in Lebanon and Vincent is based in Fremont, California. Just gonna share my screen. Okay. So thanks again for joining. To learn more about our MultiLane interconnects, our new 800 gig interconnects, and more about where MultiLane stands in the industry. We're going to start by introducing MultiLane for those of you that don't know what we do, and then talk a little bit about our SI expertise, go over our different product offerings and their applications, and then dive into our new and very exciting 800 gig interconnects. We're going to finish up with a Q&A session, but please, if you have any question throughout the webinar, just feel free to drop it in the question box, and there should be a field application engineer to help you with that or to answer you. So MultiLane was founded in 2006 in Beirut, Lebanon by our CEO, Fadi Daw. And ever since, we have grown to become the #1 supplier of compliance boards to the DCI market, the #1 supplier of high-end loopbacks to system vendors and hyperscalers. We are also very proud of the fact that we are big contributors to standard bodies and the OIF. We have a global footprint. We are headquartered in Lebanon and very proud to be. We have more than 250 employees here. We just opened up in Dubai and in China as well. We've been in Taiwan for a few years. We have a presence in France and Germany, and we also have an office, and we just opened up a bigger office in Fremont, California. We also support products ranging from 10 gig to 800 gig. We have more than 200 products released, and we work with more than 500 customers, ranging from chip manufacturers to switch vendors and host and module vendors. So before we talk about what we're up to now or where we're headed, when it comes to 800 gig, let's talk a little bit about what got us to where we are today. So it all started back in 2011 when we shipped our first 10 gig interconnects. And since then, after a lot of success with the QSFP28 test fixtures for 100 gig, and after, up to a couple of years ago, starting to when we started developing our 112 gig products, we crossed the threshold in 2020 of shipping more than 4,000 loopbacks weekly, which is a number that we're very proud of and is a number that keeps increasing, year after year with an ever, growing performance and quality. Our customers are happier than ever year after year with our loopbacks and our interconnects. So in order to get to that point, of having people trust us that much, and having these huge orders, you really need to have obviously really good quality for your products. And MultiLane has invested heavily in our SI expertise. So our SI team has grown by 300% since 2019, supporting 19 different MSA form factors ranging from QSFP-DD to OSFP to QSFP and to CFP, the whole CFP family as well. We have more than 15 products, 112 gig products released, and more than 20 under development. So now I want to talk about our different product offerings when it comes to interconnects. We have host compliance boards, we have module compliance boards, we have Loopbacks module, we have Loopback modules, different types of Loopbacks. It can be passive, it can be active, which is our new Loopback, and Vincent's going to talk about that in more detail later on. We have lost target Loopbacks as well, which are new also. We have smart Loopbacks, thermal loads, custom Loopbacks, which we'll talk about as well. And we also have adapters and analyzers. So we're going to talk about all these, in a little bit more detail. So these are the MSA form factors that we support. Again, we have, really new form factors like UDD 800, OSFP 800, and then we have QSFP, SFP-DD, DSFP, and we have CFP. look, with the industry changing at the pace that it does, MultiLane always adapts to that. So whenever there's a new form factor, we're there, like the OSFP XD, for example. This should be available at the end of Q2 also of this year. And I also want to mention, take a moment and say that MultiLane, if we're not the only company, we're probably one of the few companies that make CFP loopbacks. And so this should be very interesting for host vendors or system vendors that have a CFP application, or module vendors that have a CFP application, or CFP2 specifically, or CFP2 ACO and DCO loopbacks are, just would fit really well into these applications. Moving on to our different product lines. So starting with the loopbacks. So it literally just loops back the TX of your port signal onto the RX path. These are heavily used in switch design, validation, production, and deployment. And their most important function is to emulate transceiver behavior. So one loopback, for example, which we have a picture of, is our smart loopback, which is the ML4062. This is QSFP-DD, TL2A, which exceeds 23 watts in power dissipation. So if you need to test your port signal integrity, if you need to test the CMIS compliance, thermal dissipation, you need our loopbacks, which we are experts of, by the way, and the numbers speak for themselves. 4,000 loopbacks a week is, says a lot about the quality of our work. Moving on to host compliance boards or breakout boards. So this is particularly interesting for system vendors or switch vendors. It's a breakout tool to test the electrical path of your host, whether it's a switch, a router, a transponder, or HCB would really fulfill your requirements. And this is also where our SI expertise comes into play. You can't have a well-performing HCB without good SI. Moving on to our module compliance boards, if you have any form of pluggable, whether it's an optical transceiver, whether it's an optical cable, you need an MCB to validate it or to test it. And what it does is it just initializes and reports module diagnostics, so everything from temperature to voltage to current, and we'll see that in more detail in the next slide. And you also, of course, you have access to the module EEPROM. You can read or write from or to that module EEPROM. And you can do a bunch of tests on it, like stress testing, or just to check that your module can deliver a clean output signal. Along with all of our MCBs, we have user interfaces, and the CMIS interface is one of my favorites. It's a very comprehensive tool. It's straightforward. It's practical. It's a common management interface specification user interface. It supports several form factors like OSFP, QSFP, QSFP-DD, SFP, and DSFP as well. And through this GUI, you'll be able, again, to monitor anything going on with your module, whether it's temperature, if it's too high or too low, you'll get a warning, and that's the tab that we have as a screenshot here. So you can just see the monitor tab. You get a warning for the temperature, for high or low voltage. You get access again to the EEPROM, where you can read from that or write to that. And we also have a new feature on the CMIS GUI, which is the Common Data Block Dashboard. This is CDB. Before moving on to CDB, I have to say that we are compatible with CMIS 3.0, 4.0, and 5.0. And as long as CMIS keeps changing, so will MultiLane. MultiLane will keep adapting and keep updating, our user interfaces to keep up with industry standards. Going back to CDB and moving on to CDB. So we're actually very excited about this feature. It's still relatively very new, and it's very exciting because you'll be able to change the firmware on your module through this GUI, which is something we were never really able to do. So you can change the firmware and kind of just have access to the module firmware through this feature. It supports CMIS 4.0 and 5.0, and it supports our ML4062 MCB variants, which again is QDD. So QDD 400 and 800. Our license is now available for purchase. So last but not least, our adapters and analyzers, the ML4066 ANA. This is also a very nice product to work with. You know, you can see that we have an adapter card and then we have an analyzer card that mates onto that. And once that mating happens, you'll have access to the row speed signals, LP mode, module present, reset. So you'll be able to control those. And then you will also have access to our user interface, which I'll show you in a minute, where you'll be able to, you'll have access to the I2C communication between the host and your module. So that's really cool as well. This supports QSFP, QDD, SFP, SFPDD, and OSFP. We are also launching our new CMIS Gen 2 analyzer, and this launch really was heavily based on customer feedback, which we love doing. So we love to keep up with customer requirements and see, you know, what they like, and updating that as we go along, as you know, moving forward. And you know, this new analyzer is going to have additional features. We're going to have a clearer data view, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in detail in a bit. I just want to move on to the user interface of our current analyzer, which will also obviously be updated for our next analyzer. But this is what we have currently. So through this interface, you'll be able to do a state machine test, which is the screenshot that you can see here on the slide. And then you'll also, I mean, the coolest thing for me about this is that you get to visualize your I2C packets. So if you do a read operation or a write operation, you'll visualize all your packets on this GUI. You can also read or write to the EEPROM of your module. And this operates in 3 modes. So we have initiator mode, where your module is the device under test. And then we have target mode, where your switch is the DUT. And then we have the bypass mode, which is, it just monitors the switch to module link. And you can switch between these modes to your preference. These will also, all of them will be available, of course, in the next generation analyzer. You know, so as I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, MultiLane is the #1 supplier of compliance boards and the #1 supplier of interconnects. And you know, you can have the best SI in the world, and you can have the best performing products in the world, which we do. But I think that what makes us what we are, or what makes us who we are the factors listed here. So first of all is our customization of our interconnects. You know, when it comes to our loopbacks and our MCB, we really don't like saying no. When a customer has a specific application and they have specific requirements, we really do our best and we work our hardest to make sure that our products can be adapted to that specific application or these specific requirements. So we do a lot of that. And, you know, I mean, we'll do things that you need, if you need a higher power dissipation or a lower power dissipation, and then we'll also take care of things that you want. If you want a different color for your latch, or if you want to engrave the name of the vendor on the shell, you know, we'll do all of that and anything in between. So these are interconnects made to measure. And then we also have different user interfaces for every MCB, which is really nice because, again, they're very practical. And I really want to emphasize on that they're very practical, very straightforward, very user-friendly. And should you not want to use our user interface, you can develop your own based on our APIs, which are compatible with Linux and with Windows. So this is also, you know, very flexible. Again, it's all about the customer. It's all about customer needs. And we are compatible with CMIS. I mean, it's no denying how critical CMIS has become in the industry. So, you know, as it keeps changing, so will we keep changing and adapting and updating and making it better. So for now, we're compatible with CMIS 3.0, 4.0, and 5.0, and we are ready for CMIS 6.0 should it come, or 5.2. And then we also have a really good technical support culture. We have an amazing sales team and an amazing field application engineering team. And should you have any question whatsoever, you can just email us, and we do our best to give you the most thorough answers, and we'll get on on calls with you guys to kind of see what's going on. If there's any issue whatsoever, we'll also demonstrate our products with calls or with meetings. So these factors really make MultiLane. They really make us the leader in interconnects, and it really explains how happy our customers are with our products and our really good performance on our products. It really explains how fast we're growing, year after year. So before Vincent takes over to talk about, I just want to introduce maybe what Vincent's going to talk about, our new 800 gig products. So we have a 112 gig channel board, which is very useful if you want to stress test a device. We have an award-winning, actually, 800 gig bird. This is the ML4079E, which won the Lightwave Award, if I'm not mistaken, which was received by Case. So this is a product that we are very proud of, very excited about. And then again, another product that we're excited about is the Gen 2 CMIS analyzer. So these are the couple of features that I was discussing earlier. So instead of having to mate the board, this will be done and put in a very nice, neat box for you. You'll have a clear data view, timestamp of transactions. You will also have a data path state machine. And of course, you'll have I2C access and sampling for I2C. And then for loopbacks, we have like the QDD 800, which is a really nice form factor coming up. And we have the ML4062 LB2A 112 for this loopback, which is, a thermal module. So it has more temperature sensors, a higher power dissipation value. And then we also have for QDD 800 as well, an MCB and an HCB. For OSFP 800, we also have an MCB and an HCB. And, these form factors are really mostly used, I think, and the most in demand in the industry. So, and I mean, there's no one better than MultiLane for these boards and these loopbacks. So, and then we also have new loopbacks, active loopbacks, low loss loopbacks, and loss target loopbacks. And I'm gonna give the floor to Vincent so that he can talk about them in more detail. So go ahead, Vincent, please.
Thanks, Anna. So thank you for passing that over. For anybody who's just coming into the webinar now or missed the very beginning, I'm Vincent Liuzzi. I'm a field applications engineer at MultiLane based out of the Fremont office. And we do have a question and answer going live, so you can feel free to answer any questions as I'm going through these slides, or we will have a designated Q&A time at the end for you to ask your questions. So to focus on 800 gig interconnects, I think a lot of you are probably already working on your 800 gig products and applications. And those of you who aren't are probably already thinking about what you may do for 800 gig or looking forward to that. But regardless of where you are at in your stage of development for 800 gig, MultiLane already has a very mature product line for 800 gig interconnects, and we're ready to support you whenever that would be. So to jump right into it, the first interconnect we have is the 800 gig host compliance boards. These are breakout boards for 112 gig electrical host testing. So these boards break out high-speed host electrical signals. We have these both available in QSFP DD 800 and OSFP 800 form factors, which are the two standards for 800 gig. And because it's 800 gig, it's 8 by 112 gig electrical lane access via a single board for all 8, transmitter and receiver for OSFP, or a 2-board pair for QSFP DD, which is one board will be channels 1 through 4 transmitter and receiver, and the other channel will break out 5 through 8 transmitter and receiver. And the key thing about these MultiLane 800 gig HCBs is they have high quality signal integrity, which ensures low loss, which gives you a strong signal fidelity. And what I mean by that is if you look over at the insertion losses on the right, on top we have the OSFP form factor, and on the bottom we have the QSFP DD. We have very low loss, which gives us the strong SI performance. These are both within the IEEE 802.3CK spec, as well as the CEI VSR 56 gig NRZ spec and the CEI VSR 112 gig PAM4 spec. And all of our, 800 gig interconnects follow these specs, but more than that, they have the best performance in the market in terms of SI and low loss, which allows you to accurately model and test any 800 gig host system. Because when you plug this into the host system, you're getting that high-speed electrical signal out. And I'm sure, as many of you know, at 112 gig electrical, even a little bit of loss or reflection can cause a big change in the BR performance or the I. So having that, that good, strong performance will make sure that the result that you're testing, the high speed you break out, is actually representative of that of the host port that you were intending to test. So to show an application of using the 800 gig HCB, I have a picture here of a little diagram of a test you could run. Let's say you have an 800 gig, OSFP switch. You could plug the 800 gig OSFP HCB, which I have here in the picture, into one of the host ports and get access to all the high-speed electrical signals. Then you can cable both the transmitter and receiver to any, test equipment that you may want to use. For this example, I have a MO4035, which has a sampling oscilloscope, so we could look at the eye diagram coming out of the host. We also have a pattern generator and error detector so that we could do BR testing both into the switch on the switch's receiver or on the test equipment to test the switch electrical transmitter, as well as, the ML4035 has TDR capability as well in case you want to do time domain measurements. And the key here is when you're looking at that eye or that BR on your test equipment, you want that to be, what you're really intending to test is the host port. And that's what you can be have confidence with the very good SI performance is there's the eye that you see on the test equipment is going to be representative of that coming out of the switch. And for all our mated test fixtures, we do provide the real S parameters in case you want to de-embed the signal trace path from the HCB out of your system. The next 800 gig interconnect is the module compliance board. Senna talked a bit about the module compliance boards and what they can provide you. But a focus on 800 gig is they allow you to test the basically do advanced pluggable testing. Same form factors here we have offered, so QSFP-DD 800 or OSFP 800. As Senna mentioned, with our MCBs, you get the, CMIS test GUI, which allows you to test all the low speeds. So that includes I2C read-write commands, loading MSA memory maps, validating the CMIS, as well as CDB, which can lead to extra functionality such as firmware download. And really, again, the S21, the SI performance is very strong on these within the IEEE 802.3CK spec and both CEI VSR specs. And that enables you to test, your devices, whether it be a transceiver, an AEC, a DAC, or other modules via the breakout of the high-speed signals. Looking at an example of how you could use an MCB to test your product is using an 800 gig BERT. Here's the MultiLane 800 gig BERT that I've cabled to the MultiLane 800 gig QSFP DD MCB. And in the MCB, we have plugged in a optical transceiver with an optical fiber loopback. And this allows us to do the BER testing both pre and post FET on this transceiver. And the key here is what you want to be testing when you're looking at the BER is the signal coming out of the electrical receiver on the pad from the transceiver. But before you can test that signal, it goes through the MultiLane MCB and then to the cables to the BERT. So there is some path there that the signal is going to have to go through before you can actually do a BER test, whether it be pre or post FET. Because the MultiLane has such high performance, top of the market SI, that BR is good that you see on the BERT is going to be representative of what the transceiver is giving you. If you're not using, the top of the line MultiLane boards, what could happen is maybe there's some reflection or higher loss, and you're actually getting a worse BR than the transceiver is providing. And really that's the goal with our MCBs and HCBs is to provide that high, strong SI performance at a very competitive price. And on top of the standard MCB and HCB, we do offer a form factor with MXPM70 connectors. Again, this is QSFP-DD 800 and for OSFP 800. And these are basically built with a high performance PCB and we put the MXPM70 footprint onto the HCB and MCB. So the real key here is this uses the Huber-Suner MXPM70 connectors, which enables you, instead of having to do a lot of individual cabling with precision connectors, whether that be the 2.4 or the 1.8 millimeter in the standard MCB HCB, you get an easier plug. And you can use, in a picture on the bottom left, we have MXPM70 breakout cables to get access to each individual channel, or you could use MXPM70 to MXPM70 to go to your test equipment. And the great thing about this is you can actually de-embed the Huber-Suner connector in cables, so that during your compliance test, this doesn't add any loss to your test. And still, the MCB and HCB are all within the 802.3CK spec and both CEI VSR specs, which is still going to give you that high performance that you expect out of a multi-lane mated test fixture. And also, it'll give you that easy connector with low loss. A lot of our customers right now are really in love with the QSFP DD800 MXPM70 HCB. So that's pictured in the top right here. A lot of our that's really hot right now, and it's a very good product that we're excited to show you. Another key interconnect for 800 gig testing is the 112 gig channel emulation board. So this is a channel board with a range of insertion loss targets at 26 gigahertz, with 26 gigahertz as the Nyquist for 112 gig electrical PAM4 testing. And what this allows you to do is characterize the equalization capability of your active DUT designs. If you look at the picture of the board, we have several traces of different lengths. So we have up to 24 dB of ISI loss in 2 dB increments. You can see an S21 plot with those increments broken out, but what this allows you to do is characterize the equalization capability. And what I mean by that is you can add these passive loss paths before your receiver and see how the equalization is working from every end of the spectrum. On the low end with 2 dB, you can check to make sure that your receiver is not over equalizing an already good signal because there's low loss and causing errors. And on the other end, you can really push it to the upper limit and see just how much loss can we put in this path and can this receiver handle before we start to get, post-FEC errors. And this is really, really good, and the channel board will allow you to emulate those passive loss paths for your testing. Again, with this, we will provide the real S parameters for every single trace on the board. And one key thing that I'd like to point out here that really speaks to the SI team here at MultiLane that Senna mentioned has grown 300% over the past 3 years, is if you look at the S21 plot, you can see that we have linear strong performance, not just at and up to 26 gigahertz, which is the Nyquist, but even extending out past that up to 40 gigahertz. And this is actually really important. If you look at a lot of other channel boards that you may see in the market, maybe they cut off the graph that they show you at 27 gigahertz or 30 gigahertz, or maybe they do show you and you see an extreme drop off after that Nyquist frequency. And for really next level performance, you want to have continued good performance. You want to have a buffer zone even past the 26 gigahertz. And that's what we provide here. And that's what really makes MultiLane the #1 top of the market in terms of SI performance for these interconnects. Jumping to loopbacks, I do see a question in chat about some loopbacks. So yeah, I'm going to get into the loopbacks right now, starting with passive. I know Senna talked about the passive loopbacks already, but focusing on 800 gig, we have QSFP DD800 and OSFP 800, which are the key MSAs for 800 gig. And Senna mentioned we ship more than 4,000 of these loopbacks weekly. And I really want to emphasize that, because what that means is we are experts in these loopbacks, right? There's a reason we're shipping more than 4,000 of these weekly. Not only our SI performance, but also the features that we offer, such as programmable thermal loads, right? This allows you to replicate a thermal behavior of a real optic at a lower cost. And because they're programmable, you can emulate different thermal loads depending on the active device you're trying to emulate. For example, let's say you have a device from vendor A, you can program the thermal load in the loopback to mimic that, plug it in and do testing with that, and then reprogram the same loopback to emulate a thermal load from vendor B. So you can really go to all the corners that you would need in your testing. And the key thing here with loopbacks is they allow you to quickly test and debug a failing port by plugging in the loopback, which is really good for lab or mass production use. Let's say you have an active device plugged in your host port and something's going wrong. You don't want to have to debug the problem from both ends. What you can do is remove the device, plug in a loopback. If the host port comes up and you have good performance, then you know the issue is with the active device. If you pull it out, if you still see bad performance, even when you plug in the loopback, then you know it's from the host port itself. And it allows you to quickly isolate where the issue is, because you don't want to waste your precious time and resources debugging both ends of a problem. And the great thing about the loopbacks is they emulate the DUT devices, not only in terms of thermal profile, but also in terms of, we can load custom EEPROMs into there. You can program the EEPROM, it's CMIS compliant, so you can do firmware tests on the host. It allows you to emulate everything about a DUT device at a fraction of the price with more consistent performance than you'll see between active devices. And as Sana mentioned, we really make this a fully customizable product, whether that's custom thermal spots, customers who want custom insertion losses or custom EEPROMs for the firmware test. We support that because to us, this is more than just a product, it's a solution for you. And we want to make sure you're enabled to have the best testing results, best testing equipment to get you the results that you want. But as we're talking about 800 gig here, there's going to be high loss ports, and you can't just use passive device. They're not going to be enough. So that's why we have the active loopback. And I saw a question in chat, do we have active loopbacks? We do. The high loss ports at 800 gig are going to require retiming to recover the link. So we have active loopbacks that are DSP-based loopback modules. We support multiple vendors, the different devices, active devices you'll plug into your host are going to use different DSPs. And so are we, to allow you to test for that. And these active loopbacks are really going to enable you to do retiming and equalization of the host port signal for your testing. That means a PPG that can do PRBS generator and an error detector as well for BR tests in both directions. This allows you to validate the port performance with an active device, which is going to not only have improved performance over passive devices, but also for most of your 800 gig applications, this host is going to be used in the customer environment with active devices. So you want to test with active devices. But with a multi-lane active loopback, not only do you test with the active device, you get full control of that active device, which makes it ideal for high loss port validation. And you can do things such as host to module link training, because you can actually go into we give you control into the DSP, so you can go and edit those FFE, FIR tabs and actually tune the signal so you can do link training with the module and host characterization. With the active loopback, we're also supporting an advanced mode where you have a full GUI, BERT GUI with that controls the active loopback. And that's going to be very similar to Thunderbird for any of you that are familiar. If you're not familiar with Thunderbird, that means advanced BR, advanced equalization settings, and CMIS testing, all in one GUI that's very fast and responsive, very intuitive and clean, as well as comes with a nice API. So it really enables that. And you can actually access that GUI through the nose of the module. If you look at the picture here, there's a little USB-C plug in the nose of the module. That's where you can access the GUI and control the signals. But also we want to enable you to do it through the host itself. So you can do all of the controls of the DSP and PRBS generation and error detector through I2C in the host as well. And we have full documentation on that you can find available on our website. But now I want to talk about the few applications where you won't be using active devices in your host. And that's mostly going to be for DAC cables. So for DAC cables, we have our loss targeted loopback. This is a passive loopback module that supports 800 gigs, that's 8 by 112 gig electrical. And these have the same signal integrity, that means the same COM, S21 and S11 as an 800 gig DAC. This allows you to validate an 800 gig port for passive copper cables without having to use those passive copper cables. What's the advantage, you may ask, of the loss targeted loopback? Well, the DAC cables can be very heavy or more expensive than the loss targeted loopback, and they have high variation, right? So the loss targeted loopback is going to be more cost effective, be more consistent in terms of its performance from module to module, and be way less hefty to use. It can be very cumbersome. I'm sure if any of you have ever loaded up a full switch with a set of DACs, it gets very heavy, cumbersome, and it's hard to cable, whereas that's not going to be the case with the loss targeted loopbacks. You know, with the loss targeted loopbacks, we target either 6 or 9 dB attenuation at Nyquist, depending on the length of DAC cable you're using, whether that be 1 meter, 1.5 meter, or 2 meter DAC. And the best part about this is, as I mentioned, the COM, the S21, the S11, you know, the whole SI profile is mimicked with this loss targeted loopback. It's the same SI profile as a DAC without having to use that DAC in the testing environment. So this is really good for DAC testing, for anything that's not active, for your passive needs, for DACs. This is going to be probably the go-to loopback. And both the active loopback and the loss targeted loopback have also these standard module features as well, such as the, you know, thermal programming and the EEPROM program. So that's a good cover of all our 800 gig interconnects from my side. I know Santa gave us a lot of different products in our interconnect family. This is our latest and we're excited to show it to you. So now we're going to open it up for questions and answers because I know we covered a lot. So feel free to drop them in chat and we'll be happy to answer them and we'll stick around for those. We will also be providing our emails at the end in case there are any questions that are a little bit sensitive and you don't have the capability to state, you know, in an open webinar. Let me click one more page and you can see the technical, you know, for any technical questions, you can email fae@multilaneinc.com, or for any sales support, you can email sales@multilaneinc.com. Yes, I saw a question. In COM S21, what does COM mean? So the COM is going to be the channel operation margin. It's a common measurement for passive devices and paths. The S21 is the insertion loss, and S11 is the reflection. That's a good question. Yep. Let me go back to the emails, but we can go back to the slides depending on the questions anyone has. We'll leave it. We'll stay online for a bit to open questions. But you know, for those of you who don't have any questions or are satisfied, you know, with what you've seen, you know, feel free to reach out to us with anything that you don't feel like you can follow up here. And really, we want to thank you for listening to our webinar. You know, thank you for giving your time for us to show you this. We ran a bit under so that we can give you some of your time back to you if you don't have any questions. And you know, really excited to hopefully work with you in the future and support you. So thank you very much from both me and Sana and the whole MultiLane team. Will this recording be available? That's a great question. Yes, we are recording this and we will send out the recording. It takes Zoom a little time to save the recording, but we will send it out to all the attendees. Great question. Yeah, thank you. Do we have a specific test platform for 800 gig AEC cable since you missed an early part of our presentation? That's a great question. So in terms of the test platform for an AEC in the interconnect side, which is what we're focusing on this webinar, right? It would be the 800 gig MCBs. I think you probably saw that one. But in terms of the AEC testing itself, we do have an 800 gig BERT, as well as our ML4035 box, which I did show briefly, which for cables can do, you know, time domain measurements on the passive aspects of cables, as well as a scope and a BERT functionality. But we do have a very mature 800 gig BERT product. Here's a picture of it. Yeah, great question. Thank you. Thank you, Jingsun. Sen and I
Vincent, is
will,
there, yeah,
yeah, I was
I
about to
just,
say,
we should
go
have
ahead.
also dropped in like our personal emails for, you know, for such questions also, if someone wants more details, a more detailed answer.
That's a great idea. And actually under the question that's in the answered questions tab where it asks if the someone asked if the
Recording,
recording will be available, we'll
yeah.
drop our personal emails in case you have any specific follow-ups on the slides for me or Sana. Yeah, thank you. It's very important. So I believe we're kind of winding down. I see some people leaving. So again, thank you very much for listening to our webinar. We'll continue to stick on if you have any questions. We will, yeah, we will definitely be happy to reach out to you or get in contact with you. So feel free to reach out, ask us any questions, and we'll definitely see you around.
You will. I probably won't, all the way from here.
Yes, we have FAEs all over the world. So no matter where you're calling in from, you'll be sure to have a MultiLane FAE in your lab or on your video screen in any meeting.